Emma barely felt the car moving. She was focusing on his voice, the voice that was telling her that he was sorry for keeping her so long. Her eyes felt heavy and her head was spinning, but she listened to his voice. Are you as relieved as I am that Emma's finally being released? Before we continue, I'd like to welcome you back and to encourage you to like, share, and subscribe. I truly enjoy bringing you these stories. I'd love to see this channel grow. Now let's get back to the story. Emma felt weak and her captor allowed her to sit up. After freshening up, he led her back to what she decided was a couch. She surmised that she was in a home or apartment and no longer in the trailer or warehouse. Professor, I want to tell you that I had no intention of hurting you. You remind me of my mother. She was a teacher too. What you do is very important and you should go back to doing it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a phone call to make. That distorted voice wasn't creepy at all, Emma thought to herself. She was hopeful, however. She suspected that the tea he'd given her earlier was spiked with something. She was feeling unnaturally groggy, and she couldn't keep her eyes open. Earl awoke early. He showered quickly and got dressed. Emma was being released today, 4 days captive, and he couldn't guess what shape she'll be in when he finds her. While he waited by the phone, Paul was shadowing Dixon. Agent Stillwell decided that they'd keep him on the case, but with limited access to pertinent information. Walter Bolton entered his study and closed the door behind him. He called Mr. Sterling, who confirmed that he had just boarded his private plane. Walter thanked him for his business and hung up. In the mirror on his desk, he checked his disguise. He changed into a pair of jeans and sweater, then carefully pulled out his mother's wheelchair. He returned to the living room to find the professor slumped over sound asleep. The medicated drink is making his job easy. She's too out of it to cause any problems. He lifted her up gently and placed her in the wheelchair. Walter patted her hand once she was in the chair. Emma tried not to react. The medicated drink did make her groggy, but she wasn't completely under. She was paying attention. He guided her into the elevator and into the back seat of his car, all the while making small talk with her. She didn't answer, and she was too sick to feel anything more than relief that her ordeal was almost over. Finally, the car stopped, and he pulled her out and into the wheelchair once more. He lifted her once more and sat her down with her back against something rough. "Goodbye, Professor. Keep teaching," Walter said and walked away. Emma's hands were tied too tight for her to remove the blindfold, and she was too weak to even try. She heard the car drive off and she was left alone. She could tell that she was out in the elements again. She could feel a cold wetness seeping into the blankets. Was that snow? Panic rose up like bile in her throat and she moaned. What if no one called Earl to let him know where she was? She was sure she had pneumonia and at the very least, a mild case of hypothermia. She could die if she was left exposed much longer. That man didn't have to pull a trigger like he'd done on Rivera and Santiago, but he was killing her just as effectively, she thought morosely. Earl rushed to pick up the receiver and glanced at his watch. It was 11:30, and the moment of truth had arrived. "Solano," he said into the receiver. "Detective, I truly enjoyed our talks. You will find your lady love at the Calvary Cemetery along the Long Island Expressway. I would suggest that you hurry. She has a fever and didn't look good." Walter hung up and got into his car and drove off. He played a little with the idea of hanging around to watch the detective collect the professor, but decided that it was safer if he didn't. He drove to a car wash and got a thorough wash, and then went over the inside, paying attention to everything he touched. When he was satisfied, he got back into the elevator and went home. Much later, he would go dump the car. Earl contacted his partner and gave him the location, and then he was off. Earl, being the policeman that he was, wouldn't let traffic hinder him. He threw the flashing lights up on top of his car and flicked the switch. Now with sirens blaring, he controlled traffic. 15 minutes later, Paul's own flashing lights entered the cemetery. They split up, driving slowly, scouring the cemetery. An hour later, Earl signaled Paul. Earl approached the bundle first and called out her name. The bundle moved and he could see the top of her head. Very gently, he pushed the blanket away to reveal Emma blindfolded. The tape over her mouth came off next. She moaned and he hugged her close. "It's okay, don't try to talk. We've got you, baby. I've got you." Emma opened her mouth and nothing came out. She opened her eyes, then closed them again in a dead faint. 2 hours later, Emma was in a private room at New York Hospital, a mere 5 minutes from the college, resting comfortably. Once cleared for visits, her family was notified and they rushed over. At the hospital lobby, Chief Lightfeather took his men aside to speak privately. There were reporters everywhere. Someone alerted the press that the professor was found, and he had a devil of a time evading them. He couldn't give a statement if he didn't know anything. Gentlemen, I could reprimand you for keeping this from us, but under the circumstances, I probably would have made the same call. So you were saying you got a call telling you where to find Mrs. Grant? Earl nodded. Yes, sir. Then I contacted my partner and drove to the cemetery. We found her under a tree in plain sight wrapped in blankets. I want those blankets sent to forensics and a statement from Mrs. Grant as soon as possible. Yes, sir. Earl walked away and got into the elevator quickly as reporters descended on the chief and Stillwell. Emma's condition wasn't as bad as she thought. A mild case of pneumonia that a course of antibiotics will treat. She was breathing better and her color was less gray. Earl sat down beside her bed and reached over to touch her hand. She opened her eyes and smiled at Paul. Hi, she said weakly. Hi yourself. You're looking much better, Paul replied. Yes, much better. I can't believe I'm warm again, she murmured. It's good to see that twinkle in your eyes again, Emma. I'm going to leave you to visit with Earl, and I'll stop by to see you tomorrow. Paul squeezed her hand and turned to leave. Okay, and thank you for not giving up, Emma said with tears in her eyes. Earl squeezed her other hand and she turned to him. Paul caught Earl's eyes and winked at him. Emma's tears spilled over and her lips trembled. It had been 4 days since she had seen or heard a friendly voice. In all that time, she hadn't doubted that Earl would find her. Earl leaned down and kissed her cheek and smoothed down her hair. He couldn't keep tears from misting his own eyes. My heart is full right now. I can't tell you how relieved I am that you're safe. I was so afraid that he wouldn't let me go. I know that you want answers, but there's not much I can tell you. I was blindfolded the whole time. Hush, love, you don't have to talk about it right now. Just concentrate on getting better. I spoke with the doctor and he said that you have a mild case of pneumonia and you're dehydrated. He said that you should be well enough to go home in a few days. Detective, I don't have a home anymore. It was blown up if you recall, and I am also thinking that no one has been arrested yet, so there's a possibility that I am still in danger, correct? Has the police found a safe house for me yet? Earl smiled. She was on the mend, he thought. Professor, I do believe that you were at a safe house, and that said safe house is awaiting your return. Oh, she answered with a bright smile, even though her eyes filled with tears. Will I have the same policeman watching over me? I think it can be arranged. Is there anything else you require? Asked Earl with a smile. Carefully, he hugged her close. I have to leave now, but I'll be back later. She understood that he still had a job to do, and she would never stand in the way of that. She was safe now. She was further assured by the friendly wave of Officer Nolan, who stood outside her door. Earl blew her a kiss, and then he was gone. Detective Earl Solano drove back to the precinct and entered the chief's office. Paul was already there, and so was Agent Stillwell. Each man nodded to each other. Their case was laid out on a big corkboard. Earl studied the board and learned a few aspects of the case he and his partner hadn't known. Although they'd figured it out in the end, the Special Investigations Unit had been watching the airport for over 6 months. Stillwell and his team had been working with the DEA concerning Silver. Dixon had confessed that the diversion was to keep attention away from Sterling while he retrieved the packages Rivera and Santiago stashed at the customs warehouse. He also produced documents he had on everything he'd done. In Earl's opinion, the whole outfit needed an overhaul. The chief cleared his throat and announced that even though they had recovered the professor, they would continue working with SI and the DEA until Silver was no longer a threat. Gentlemen, this meeting is for the purpose of apprehending Sterling's supplier. I don't have a problem with working with other agencies on this, but we must all agree that we all have the same information. We either work together or not at all. He looked at Solano. Do you have anything to add, Solano? No, sir, except that I am looking forward to meeting with the professor's kidnappers. He didn't care who he had to deal with, so long as he got a clear shot of the guy who orchestrated the professor's kidnapping. I must warn you, Detective Solano, that I will not tolerate vengeance from you. We are going to do this by the book. I specifically asked for you to because I was impressed with your work. Also, you've had contact with him. It may prove useful, Agent Stillwell said. Put like that, how can I refuse? Earl said dryly. He really wanted his 5 minutes. After the meeting, the chief dismissed the detectives, telling them to go get some rest. Earl hung back to speak with the chief. Something on your mind, detective? Yes, sir. I understand that Mrs. Grant will have to give her statement soon. I'd like to request that Paul and I conduct the interview. We will record everything so it can be shared. I am well aware of your relationship with the Professor Solano. You and Derek will do it as soon as she is able. Now go home and get some rest. The weather had turned decidedly colder. Earl pulled up the collar of his coat and hunted up his car in the lot. He looked up at the sky. It had started to snow. Walter Bolton sat in his living room sipping a cup of tea. He was watching a basketball game feeling very relaxed. He watched the news flash announcing the miraculous recovery of Professor Grant. The reporter reported on her status as being stable. He also knew that the chase was probably on because if he'd learned anything about those two detectives, it's that they were good and they wouldn't give up. Even so, he felt secure. No one knew what he looked like. Those two are going to be very disappointed. He'd been protecting himself for a long time. All his loose ends were tied, and his money was carefully transferred to his Swiss account. And since no one was looking for Arnold Feinstein, nothing can be traced back to him. A long time ago, when he'd started his business, he'd taken certain precautions to assure that if anything went wrong, he'd be untouchable. Emma stirred in her sleep and awoke with a start. Earl was beside her quickly. He'd been watching her sleep and knew the instant her nightmare began. She hadn't cried out, but was restless. I'm here, baby. You're safe, he assured her. Have you been here all along? She asked, grateful that he was. I promised not to leave you alone, he half whispered. That chair must be so uncomfortable, and she said, you should go home and get proper rest, Earl. Earl was sitting on a hard chair beside her bed and had thrown his jacket around his shoulders. Professor, I'm resting just fine watching over you. I could be a bit more comfortable if you'd move over a little, he said as he got up to sit beside her. There was a delighted smile on her face. I don't know, detective. It's a small bed. Earl smiled, slipped off his shoes, and slid in beside her. It was a tight fit, but she wouldn't have wanted it any other way. It seemed a lifetime ago since she'd been like this with him, and she welcomed his closeness. Now, isn't this much better? Asked Earl. He helped her move, until she was half on and half off his body. Yeah. I've missed you so much. I never gave up hope that you'd find me. Every time I started to feel depressed, I would think of you and just knew that it would be all right. I won't lie to you, Emma, Earl admitted. I've had a couple of bad moments myself. I hated knowing that we had to play by his rules. But now is not the time to talk about this. I want you to get better and for you to go home. I suppose I could continue staying with you until I can find a new apartment. Earl was rhythmically smoothing her hair and stopped. He was deathly afraid of letting her out of his sight, and the thought of her being anywhere but his apartment was unthinkable. Professor, you must be feeling better because you are being irritating again. You'll stay with me until we can find a place suitable for both of us. Detective, you are way ahead of yourself. Emma, I'm serious. I want us together. Yes, I know, Emma said. I think I want that too. But I want some time to make sure that it isn't because you've been my hero or not. I love you, Emma. I can wait. I love you too. Earl held her until they both fell asleep. A loud gasp awoke the detective, and he knew instinctively that some very stern nurse had caught him in bed with her patient. He turned ever so slightly and was caught in the glare of a pleasant-looking nurse. She just stood there with her arms crossed and stared him down. Well now, are you going to get up, or do I have to take your vitals too? She asked. Trying not to feel embarrassed, Earl sat up, careful not to jostle Emma too much. He flashed the nurse a smile. Good morning, nurse. I'll leave the professor in your capable hands. He shoved his feet into his shoes and blew Emma a kiss on his way out the door. You know, Gladys, you've embarrassed him. Emma mock-scolded her nurse. Gladys's face changed and she chuckled a little. He is lucky I was the one to come in here this morning. There are a few new personnel on the floor today, and I only came in here to warn you. We have a few students with their nursing instructors who are eager to get their hands dirty, if you know what I mean. You're a celebrity on the floor, and everybody wants to take a peek at you. Emma frowned. Aren't I off limits? There's a police officer outside, isn't there? Yeah, but wasn't there one in the bed with you too? I guess it was a good thing you got here first, isn't it? Gladys let out a belly laugh and helped Emma wash and get ready for breakfast. Then she left her, assuring her that no one would disturb her. Earl entered the precinct smiling. The gray-drab hallways with slogans for Uncle Sam and posters of wanted felons, all used to depress him, but not this morning. This morning he couldn't stop smiling. He smiled because he was happy. He walked past the chief's office and halted. The chief was speaking loudly and his office door was ajar. His partner was seated inside too. He entered the office and the chief pointed to a seat. Earl sat beside his partner and they both waited for him to finish his tirade. Stillwell has filed a complaint against you two, citing that you made side deals with the kidnappers. He's trying to get you off the case. With all due respect, sir, you were privy to everything we did. We gave you a full report. We don't owe him anything. When his team failed at the hotel, we offered to help, but he declined. If you ask me, he's trying to save face, sir, Earl said. I know that, the chief made a face. Now, he's going to watch you two like a hawk. I don't have to tell you that I want you to be careful and to please play by his book. They met with Stillwell, who tried to downplay the report. He said that he'd submitted the report way before he'd realized how valuable the detectives were to the team. Earl and Paul said nothing and followed him to his headquarters in downtown Brooklyn. There, Stillwell introduced the detectives to agents Danvers and Parker. Each member was given a folder with information on the case. A sketch of the Dixon who rented the car was inside, courtesy of Mr. Brown from the rental company. Stillwell told them that the sketch was being run through the FBI database with no results thus far. The image matched the images on the surveillance tapes from the college campus. No one knew who this man was. Earl stared at the sketch and compared it to the pictures they had and looked at his partner. Paul nodded to him. This wasn't a real picture. Whoever this was in disguise. Sir, this man is in disguise, Paul pointed out. We know that, detective. That is why it is taking so long for the database to find a match. Our smuggler may have taken pains to mask his appearance, but there are aspects of his facial structure that he can't hide, like the shape of his eyes or mouth. We have people working on this. The car was recovered with tired treads matched from the cemetery. He is clever and had it washed and detailed inside and out, but that doesn't mean we won't find anything. Now, all that's left is Mrs. Grant's interview. Earl assured him that he and Paul were going to get it done after their briefing. On the drive to the hospital, Earl and Paul discussed how they were going to work the case. They didn't like the way Stillwell and his team worked. They agreed to work with them up to a certain degree. Once they had everything set up, they'd call the team in. The partners dodged reporters and took the stairs. Officer Nolan nodded at them, and they entered Emma's room. She opened her eyes and smiled at them. Hello, you two. I have nurses on this floor and others who've been asking for information on you. So if you'll write down your birthdays, astrological signs, and phone numbers, I just might be able to get some rest around here. I have had my blood pressure taken 8 times before I caught on, she told them. Why didn't you tell them that we were both taken? Asked Paul. Why should I? This is the most fun I've had in days. I've gotten Gladys to promise that she doesn't know about us, Earl, and it's kind of fun to hear what other women think of you. And Paul, there's a nurse on the pediatrics floor who would love to give you a sponge bath. She's cute too. How do you feel about redheads? Paul shook his head. I think you need another form of entertainment. Remind me to bring you some puzzles, Paul replied. Earl leaned down and planted a kiss on her forehead, then sat down beside her to clasp her free hand. She still had the intravenous drip on the other. He cleared his throat, not at all amused by her teasing. We're here to conduct your interview, to get your statement. He showed her a small recording device. We'll record everything with your permission. Okay, I understand. What would you like to know? This is Detective Paul Derrick with the Narcotics Division at the 115. Mrs. Grant, I would like for you to go back to the night of the kidnapping, before you were taken. Were you contacted by anyone? Paul asked as he spoke into the recorder. No, when in class I leave my phone in my office. Do you remember seeing anyone suspicious in the classroom or outside it? Emma shook her head and frowned in concentration. No, I don't believe I did. I was focused on getting my test booklets back to my office when I left the test room. Did they say anything to you when they took you? No, replied Emma. Paul nodded at his partner. This is Detective Earl Solano with the Narcotics Division at the 115th. Mrs. Grant, could you go over what happened when you stepped out the classroom? I had an armful of test booklets and I was headed to my office. Suddenly there was someone behind me. He covered my mouth. I dropped the booklets and grabbed at the hand. But then a black cloth came over my eyes. Then they guided me to the van. There were 3 men in it with me because I heard 3 different voices. Now, Mrs. Grant, you were being held at the customs warehouse initially. Is there anything you can tell us about it? At first, they told me that I'd be released within the hour as soon as you found the cylinders, and I couldn't understand why no one thought I was out of place with so many other sounds all around me. Were you hurt in any way? Other than being cold, no one hurt me. The guy in charge stopped them before things got out of hand. Emma swallowed hard. She had forgotten this part and squeezed Earl's hand. What did the guy stop? Asked Earl in a strained voice. They had me tied down to a chair, and then their dog came sniffing around me. The Hispanic guy said that Wolfie liked me, and that since his dog liked me, he wanted to get to know me better. He groped at me, but the guy in charge stopped him. He said that they had enough problems without adding rape to it. Emma couldn't stop the tear that slid down her face. Earl stopped the recorder. The look on his face was explosive. Would you like to continue with this later? He asked Emma. There was such rage swirling inside him, he didn't know if he wanted to continue. No, I'm okay. I had forgotten about that. Earl switched the recorder back on. Mrs. Grant, when we spoke with your kidnapper, his voice was disguised. Were any of the voices disguised? Did you hear any names? No, the only time a voice was disguised was when I was transferred from the trailer to the apartment or house. Is there anything you can tell us about them? The leader sounded white, while the others were Hispanic. He spoke proper English, and he was kind. When I expressed that I was cold, he had the others cover me with a blanket. Okay, when you were moved out of the warehouse, what happened next? I had fallen asleep and they woke me and told me that they were taking me somewhere where you would find me, except that wasn't true. Much later, the leader came and told me that he was sorry he couldn't let me go yet. He promised that he would come back for me the following day. I was in the trailer, cold, and there were mice crawling all over me. I screamed for him to let me out, but he didn't, and I could hear him driving away. Mrs. Grant, how did you get those scars on your wrists? Emma looked at her wrists and nodded at them. In the trailer, I had the blindfold on and my hands tied behind my back. I squatted down and passed my legs through my arms to the front. After removing the blindfold, I found that I had zip ties around my wrists. I used my teeth to cut them off. I must have hurt myself doing that. What happened when he came back for you? I don't remember much. I was too out of it. Much later, I started to feel warm and realized that I wasn't in the trailer anymore. I remember feeling warm and drinking a hot drink. I recognized that it was one of those medicated flu drinks. I felt groggy after and slept. He washed my face and arms, and he let me go to the bathroom. I can't remember if it was the same day or not, but he told me that he was taking me somewhere, where you'd find me. He gave me more of that drink, then he tied me up again. He used a wheelchair to get me to his car. We rode in an elevator, I remember that. Then he drove us to the cemetery, all the while talking. He kept saying that he was sorry and that I deserved to go back to teaching. Paul nodded his satisfaction and Earl switched the recorder off. Emma, I'd like to thank you for your cooperation and thoroughness. If you remember anything else, let Officer Nolan know, and he'll contact us. After Paul left, Earl took Emma into his arms. She had her head on his shoulder and breathed in his scent and felt safe. That's it for now. Come back soon to find out how the detectives capture Walter Bolton. In the meantime, for those of you just tuning in, please go back to the beginning and like, share, and subscribe.